My girlfriend just rejected my proposal for the 99th time. Honestly, her excuses were always totally bizarre, but this time, her reason was straight up psychotic. Looking me dead in the eye, she actually told me she was going to have a baby with another man. She stood there, fully braced for me to scream, cry, and throw a massive tantrum. But instead, I just calmly pulled out my phone and drafted a post. Getting married in 1 month? Thinking of switching brides. Anyone interested? Honestly, I hit send thinking it was just a joke and absolutely no one would reply. But to my absolute shock, my childhood frenemy, Sophie Reed, called me the very second the post went live. And the craziest part? Once the call connected, she didn't ask a single question. She just cut right to the chase and dropped a bomb. If you really want to switch brides, how about me? I wasn't entirely sure if she was messing with me, but honestly, she really was the most logical choice. Our families were perfectly matched, and we knew all of each other's deepest, darkest secrets. After a heavy, tense silence, I finally sighed and said, "Fine, what's your price?" She just chuckled. "Nothing much. But since we are actually getting married, you're going to change my contact name from annoying mortal to wife. And honestly, I want everything other normal married couples have too." Her bold request caught me completely off guard. I genuinely assumed she only offered because her crazy family had been breathing down her neck to tie the knot. See, Sophie Reed and I might have grown up together, but we were basically sworn mortal enemies from day one. We bickered, fought, and tried to ruin each other's lives from kindergarten, all the way through high school, right up until college. It was only when we shipped off to different universities in entirely different cities that our toxic little rivalry finally hit pause. Later on in college, I ended up falling head over heels for Mia Bennett at first sight. I was so desperate to win her over, I barely even visited home during winter or summer breaks. For years, I chased after Mia like an absolute fool. I poured my heart out, proposed again and again, and got ruthlessly rejected. Again and again. Her excuses just kept getting more and more ridiculous every single time. Meanwhile, over the last few years, my poor grandfather's health had really started going downhill. He had been holding on, just waiting to see me get married. But then, after my 99th proposal, Mia had the nerve to drop that completely outrageous demand on me. I clenched my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I never, ever planned on entering a fake marriage. If I was going to do this, it was going to be 100% real. The very first thing I did after hanging up with Sophie was open Mia's contact card and change her name to ex-girlfriend. Good riddance. Then, with a weird sense of satisfaction, I changed my childhood nemesis's contact name to wife. My thought process was simple. If you can hide the fact that you're literally having another man's baby, then I can definitely hide the fact that I'm swapping brides. The very next day, Mia finally dragged herself home. Her eyes were totally bloodshot, and she looked completely drained and worn down. Without missing a beat, the first thing she blurted out was, "My professor. He passed away. I have to mourn him for at least 6 months," she said dramatically. "So, we absolutely cannot get married right now." When she said that, you could tell she fully expected me to blow up and start a massive fight. After all, dragging her to the altar was the one thing I'd been begging for all these years. She weaponized that too. She knew perfectly well that my grandfather was clinging to life just to see my wedding day. So naturally, I was burning with anxiety. She even had a whole speech prepped to shut down my arguments. But instead, I just looked at her, totally unfazed, and said, "Got it." You could practically see her heart skip a beat in pure confusion. Deep down, she probably realized I was acting like a completely different person. But honestly, she was way too emotionally drained to figure out why I was suddenly so cold. Rubbing her tired forehead, she let out a sigh and spoke again. "The professor's memorial service is actually happening today. Right before he passed, he actually brought you up, too. Come on, I'll take you with me to pay our respects." Honestly, I absolutely despised her little friend Ethan Holt, but I didn't have any bad blood with Professor Holt himself. Besides, the poor guy probably never imagined his own son would twist his dying wish into an excuse to knock up my fiancée. Keeping an attitude of pure respect for the dead, I just gave a stiff nod. "Fine," I agreed. Once she finished washing up and threw on some dark clothes, she led the way to Professor Holt's gloomy funeral service. Mia and I had barely even stepped through the doors when a pathetic, tear-choked voice echoed through the hall, coming from a guy draped in traditional mourning clothes. It was Ethan Holt. He dramatically collapsed onto the floor, tears absolutely streaming down his face as he wailed out, "Mia!" Mia practically sprinted across the room in a blind panic, rushing straight to his side. She cradled him gently, helping him up without even bothering to look back at me. Completely ignoring how messed up this looked, she waved me off. "You go pay your respects first. I really need to stay here with him for a bit." Watching how incredibly soft, attentive, and frantic she was over this guy. Man, anyone who didn't know the truth would swear Ethan Holt was her actual boyfriend. Not me. I just shot them one cold, pathetic glance, scoffed mentally, and completely looked away. I was so over it. Without uttering a single word to her, I turned on my heel and marched straight up to the front of the hall, respectfully paying my final dues to Professor Holt. After offering 3 deep, respectful bows, I walked over to the late professor's pale, grieving widow. "Mrs. Holt, please accept my deepest condolences." Hearing my voice, Mrs. Holt weakly lifted her tear-filled eyes and gently grabbed my hand. "Oh, you must be Mia's boyfriend, right? Thank you so much for coming to see my husband. I heard the two of you were actually planning to get married soon," she murmured softly. Mia. She really is such a loyal, kind-hearted child. She was the one who bravely offered to mourn her beloved professor for 6 whole months. This delay must be so terribly hard on you. I just stood there, listening quietly, not offering a single word of response. Oh, the dark irony. She had absolutely zero clue about the totally twisted, absurd things Mia and her precious son were secretly planning to do behind everyone's backs. But Mrs. Holt seemed to mistake my cold silence for heartbreak. Letting out a long, heavy sigh, she patted my hand. "I know it hurts, but Mia is like a daughter to us. We practically watched her grow up. My husband was her mentor from university, all the way through her master's and doctorate, and she's someone who values those ties deeply. That is exactly why she made this decision. Please don't blame her, especially now that the bride has already been swapped." "Of course, I wouldn't blame her," I replied, playing the understanding partner. Seeing how considerate I was being, Mrs. Holt hesitated for a brief moment. Then, she spoke up again. "And please, don't mind Ethan. Even though he clings to her all day long, I can tell she doesn't feel that way about him at all. She really does love you." My entire body stiffened at those words. She loves me? I couldn't see a single trace of that so-called love. Seeing my totally unconvinced expression, Mrs. Holt couldn't help but go on and on. "Child," my husband and I used to think, that she would just spend all her time buried in medical research. We thought she'd never fall for anyone until you showed up, even though she never showed it clearly. Whenever she was sitting in front of us, she would constantly bring you up without even realizing it. She would mention that you made her something delicious again, or that you did something absolutely foolish to chase after her today. Even though it all sounded like complaints, we both knew she simply loved you without realizing it. Mrs. Holt kept listing one thing after another. She went on about all the hidden ways Mia had supposedly cared about me, without ever once actually showing it right to my face. If it had been the old me hearing those words, I probably would have been over the moon. But right now, all I felt was a bitter sense of irony. Because if she truly loved me, why had I never felt it at all? Why in the world was I always the only one desperately chasing after her? Why had she never, not even once, stopped to just wait for me? And if she really loved me, how could she be having a child with another man? From the very moment she agreed to have Ethan Holt's baby, there was absolutely no taking it back. Everything between us was already completely dead and gone. Throughout the entire memorial service, she stayed glued right by Ethan Holt's side. It wasn't until the service fully ended that she finally pulled her car up in front of me. She just threw 2 cold, emotionless words at me. "Get in." I had just been about to step forward when the car window slowly rolled down. Only then did I realize that Ethan Holt was already sitting comfortably in her passenger seat. Even Mrs. Holt was sitting right there in the back. But before I could even get a single word out, Ethan Holt's choked, tearful voice rang out. "Mia, I still want to go to the cemetery to see my dad. Just you, me, and my mom, okay?" As soon as he said that, Mrs. Holt was actually the first one to frown. "Ethan, do not be like this." It was exactly 6 words. But somehow, they struck hard. Striking right where Ethan Holt hurt the most, he suddenly burst into loud, dramatic sobs right on the spot. "Today is my dad's funeral. Can't he take a cab by himself?" Mrs. Holt was just about to keep trying to persuade him, but Mia had already made her decision. "I will come pick you up later." Mia Bennett turned to look at me, and her icy voice left zero room for argument. Right after saying that, she just started the car and sped off into the distance. And just like that, I was left standing there, completely alone in the cold. The moment Ethan Holt opened his mouth, I had already expected this exact ending. But honestly, there wasn't a single trace of sadness on my face from being abandoned. I simply stood there quietly, waiting for several long hours. But she never came back. Watching the pouring rain fall harder and harder by the minute, I finally accepted it. She really wasn't coming back for me. The funeral home was out in the middle of nowhere. There were no cabs anywhere nearby, so I had no choice but to walk straight out into the freezing rain. The storm came down heavier and heavier, completely blurring my vision. I dragged myself through that relentless rain for 2 whole hours before I finally reached a spot where I could hail a ride. Only then did I finally make it back home. Unsurprisingly, that very same night, I came down with a dangerously high fever. I was burning up, barely even conscious. I had to literally force myself to crawl out of bed just to find some fever meds to take, but the pills didn't kick in nearly fast enough. Defeated, I collapsed back onto the bed and quickly drifted into a heavy, dazed, and miserable sleep. After an entire day and night of suffering, my fever finally broke, and only then did I finally hear the familiar click of the front door opening. She walked in from outside without even bothering to look my way. She didn't mention a single word about leaving me stranded in the rain. Instead, she just started packing her luggage in complete silence. It was only after everything was fully zipped up that she finally spared me a passing glance. "Ethan is in really bad shape right now. I'll be staying over with him for the next few days. If anything happens while you're home alone, just call me." Looking at the way she just turned and left immediately after dropping that line, I could only let out a bitter, self-mocking smile. Like calling you would even matter anyway? I was standing right in front of her with a deathly pale, sickly face, and yet she didn't even notice I was ill. How could I ever expect a woman like her to leave her precious Ethan Holt behind and come rushing back to look for me? True to form, over the next few days, she never came back. She didn't bother to call me either, but honestly, I knew her whereabouts perfectly well anyway. After all, right by her side was Ethan Holt, a guy who absolutely loved oversharing his life online. Every single day, through Ethan's social media posts, I could see exactly what those two had been up to, like how she lovingly cooked him homemade porridge, or how she carefully peeled shrimp just for him, or how she took him out on a sweet date to relax and watch the fireworks. But honestly, I didn't care to pay too much attention to their little romance anymore. Instead, I walked straight into my company and slammed down my resignation letter. When my coworkers heard the news, they were all totally shocked, but I simply shook my head and gave them a light smile. I've been away for way too many years. It's finally time for me to go back to my real home. That lame excuse only left my coworkers looking even more confused. Finally, someone just couldn't hold back anymore and blurted out, "Wait, what about Dr. Bennett? Her entire life is rooted right here in this city. If you pack up and go back to your hometown, aren't you two going to end up doing long distance?" I froze for a split second. You see, even my casual coworkers knew exactly how hopelessly in love with her I was. I loved that woman enough to throw away literally everything of my own, just to make her happy. I had planted my roots in this strange, unfamiliar city entirely because of her. I loved her so deeply that everyone around us subconsciously assumed I would always be the one bleeding myself dry for this relationship. And she? She just soaked up all my sacrifices like it was her absolute birthright. But then, she took all her endless patience and sweet tenderness and handed it right over to some other guy. I just gave a bitter smile and slowly shook my head. "It isn't going to be long distance," I replied quietly. "We are simply never going to see each other ever again." After handing off the last of my work, I grabbed my cardboard box and headed straight home. The second I walked through the front door, I spotted Mia Bennett lounging in the living room right next to Ethan Holt. "Wait, what is all this?" Seeing me standing there holding a massive packing box, she froze up and asked instinctively. But my tone? It was dead calm. There wasn't a single trace of panic on my face, zero guilt of being caught. "The company is moving office locations, so I just brought my personal stuff back here first. She frowned hard, her eyes fixed on me. She opened her mouth, about to say something, but Ethan Holt suddenly jumped in and cut her right off. Zach, man, my dad passed away recently, so I've just been in a really terrible emotional state lately. I know I've done a whole lot of things wrong. I even brought up the crazy idea of having a baby with Mia, but I swear, absolutely nothing has ever happened between the two of us. I am so sorry, man. Please, don't take any of this to heart. He slapped on this totally pathetic, sad puppy expression. Honestly, if I hadn't already received that screenshot of their private chat, the one totally filled with dirty provocations, maybe I really would have fallen for his little white lies. But right now, I just wasn't in the mood to expose him. I was so entirely over Ethan Holt's pathetic little tricks. I just gave a faint nod, carried my heavy box straight back to my bedroom, and set it down. But I had only just put my things away when I realized I had left my cell phone sitting out in the living room. I was just turning around to go grab it when my bedroom door was suddenly shoved wide open. There stood Mia Bennett, gripping my phone in one hand and glaring fiercely right at me. Who exactly is saved as wifey in your phone? I stared back, stunned. In all these long, exhausting years, this was the very first time I had ever seen that panicked, angry expression on her face. Whenever she was around me, she had always been completely ice cold, totally calm, and flawlessly composed. I honestly used to think the woman didn't even know how to feel jealousy. In the past, whenever she caught me standing around with other girls, she would just stroll right past me like it was totally nothing. She wouldn't even bother sparing me a single sideways glance. She always walked on ahead, and I was always the desperate fool chasing right behind her. Just like that, in the blink of an eye, 6 whole years of my life had slipped away. Now, I finally got to see exactly what she looked like when she was burning with jealousy. But sadly for her, it was already way too late. I calmly snatched my phone back from her hand and was just about to explain when Ethan Holt's annoying voice chimed in from right behind her again. Oh, it's probably just one of his bros. We guys do that all the time, saving our best buddies as wifey as a joke. Since Ethan Holt had so graciously offered up a totally bogus excuse for me, I was way too mentally drained to even correct him. I didn't waste another single breath on either of them. I simply took my phone, stepped back into my room, and shut the door. Then, I quickly dialed the number back. Sophie Reed had suddenly called me out of nowhere at this crazy hour, so I figured it had to be something super urgent. But the second she actually opened her mouth, all she brought up were these completely trivial, random little things. Hey, have you eaten yet? It has seriously been raining non-stop down here in South City these past few days. How is the weather up there in Harbor City? Is it raining on your end too? I heard Harbor City has finally started cooling down lately. Make sure you bundle up and keep warm, okay? Don't go catching a cold. At first, I patiently answered every single one of her questions one by one, just waiting for her to finally get to the actual point. But who knew she was just going to keep rambling on and on without ever dropping the real reason she called? Eventually, I just couldn't take it anymore and was literally seconds away from hanging up. Look, what exactly do you want from me? I sighed. If you don't spit it out right now, I'm hanging up. Hearing me snap like that, she finally dropped the act and didn't dare keep rambling on about totally random things. I really just wanted to ask you something. Do you regret it? Are you seriously going to switch brides at the last minute? I let out a heavy breath. You talked in circles for that long just to ask me this? For a split second, I genuinely didn't know whether I wanted to burst out laughing or just cry. But on the other end, Sophie Reed gave me an unusually serious, totally quiet yes. There was this tiny, almost completely hidden hint of sadness in her trembling voice. Do you really not love that girlfriend of yours anymore? I originally wanted to ask how she knew all of that, but the painful reality came from behind to hit me again. From the very moment I began relentlessly pursuing Mia Bennett, all the way to my 99 crazy proposals. For all these long years, my entire social media presence had practically revolved around this one woman. I had made my desperate, undying love for her completely public to everyone. I used to wish the whole entire world would know just how deeply and fiercely I loved her. Under those kind of public circumstances, it honestly would have been a lot harder for people not to know. I smiled a bitter, self-mocking smile and slowly shook my head. but my long, heavy silence was unconsciously making Sophie Reed's anxious heart on the other end of the line completely pound. She tightened up. She was absolutely terrified that in the very next second, she would hear me say, "Yes, I actually still love her very, very much. So, let's just forget about the whole switching brides thing." But very soon, she heard my firm, undeniable answer. "I don't love her anymore." After a brief, heavy pause, I gave her one final dose of absolute reassurance. "Don't worry, Sophie. I will never, ever regret marrying you because of her." By the time I finally finished packing up my room and walked back out, Ethan Holt still hadn't bothered to leave. Seeing me step out, Mia Bennett's icy expression still looked incredibly sour and unpleasant. And after hesitating for what felt like a lifetime, she actually forced herself to bring up that saved contact name all over again. "You done talking to your buddy? From now on, don't save your friends under ridiculous names like that." I stared at her, totally caught off guard. I really didn't expect her to remember that. Still, I just gave a slow nod. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I was answering her question or agreeing to her demand, or maybe a bit of both. But Mia Bennett? She took it as total submission. Her icy expression finally melted just a fraction, and sitting right there, Ethan Holt caught every single shift in her mood. Instantly, his face twisted into something hilarious. After all, in his little fantasy world, Mia wasn't supposed to give a single damn about me. "Hey, it's still early. Zach, Mia, let me treat you guys to dinner and a movie. Just think of it as my way of saying thanks for putting up with me lately." Looking at that fake, plastic smile of his, I knew exactly what Ethan was scheming. This was just a pathetic excuse to show off. He wanted to rub it in my face just to show me how much Mia spoiled him and danced to his tune. I just shook my head and shot him down. First off, I was completely done playing these childish, jealous mind games. And second, I had a mountain of actual work to deal with. But do you really think Ethan would let this golden opportunity slip? Seeing my rejection, he instantly slapped on a pitiful, wounded puppy look and turned straight to Mia. "Mia, is Zach still mad at me? I know I was acting a bit selfish lately. He has every right to be furious. It's all my fault." And wow, the guy actually forced his eyes to turn red. Get this man an Oscar. The moment Mia saw his fake tears, her heart visibly bled for him. A second later, her glaring, disapproving eyes locked onto me. I let out a heavy sigh. I knew exactly how this played out. If I stood my ground and refused to go, I'd instantly be painted as the unreasonable, toxic villain again. So, after a pointless back and forth, I was dragged out the door with them. It was prime dinner time, so the three of us hit up a restaurant first. Ethan handpicked the place, of course, a high-end seafood joint. I shot Mia a long, piercing look. She awkwardly shifted her eyes away from mine. But the second she watched Ethan ordering his food, that sickeningly sweet, indulgent gaze returned to her face. Oh, Mia definitely felt guilty. She knew damn well that I was highly allergic to seafood. Yet, simply because precious Ethan claimed this place had the best catch in town, she still dragged me right into the crossfire. Once the feast hit the table, I just sat back and took a slow sip of plain tap water. Ethan happily scarfed down the food Mia was literally peeling for him. He blinked up at me with fake innocence. "Zach, this is amazing. Are you sure you don't want a bite?" A cold, mocking smirk tugged at the corner of my lips. I was just about to call him out, but Mia desperately changed the subject. She practically shoved another plate of freshly peeled shrimp right in front of him. His eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas. He happily shoved his face in the bowl, completely ditching his little attempt to provoke me. Dinner finally ended, but the torture wasn't over. Ethan dragged us both straight to the local movie theater. After pretending to be torn for 10 minutes, he conveniently picked a horror movie. It wasn't until we sat down in the dark theater that his little master plan clicked. I took the aisle seat, furthest away from the drama. For the next hour, I got to listen to Ethan shrieking like a banshee next to me. One second, he was so nervous he accidentally drank from Mia's soda. The next, a jump scare hit the screen, and he practically clamped onto her hand for dear life. He squealed in a complete panic, whining about how terrified he was. By the climax of the film, he completely ditched his seat and threw himself right into her lap. That sudden move made Mia freeze dead in her tracks. She frowned instinctively, raising a hand as if she was about to shove him off. But then, she hesitated. And finally, she just let her hand drop. She snapped her head toward me, catching my eyes locked right on them. Her mouth opened, desperate to explain, but I just lazily turned my head back to the screen. I acted like I was completely engrossed in the movie, without a single care in the world for their little show. The flimsy excuse died right in her throat, choking her with guilt. I could tell Mia was squirming in her seat, eaten alive by discomfort. But a soft, whimpering cry from the guy in her arms made her swallow that guilt, and she quickly went back to babying Ethan, sitting right next to them, hearing her sweet, coaxing whispers. I just let out a quiet, breathy laugh. It hit me right then I was never coming back to this miserable city again. I figured I should at least say my goodbyes to the few friends who mattered. So, when a buddy invited me to a class reunion, I actually said yes. The day of the party rolled around. By the time I walked into the private room, the whole crew was already buzzing. I didn't beat around the bush. I looked at them and dropped the bomb. In a couple of days, I'm heading back to my hometown to get married. I honestly don't know if we'll ever cross paths again after this. But hey, you're all more than welcome to crash the wedding when the big day comes. The second those words left my mouth, the room exploded. A few guys instantly remembered a cryptic post I'd made earlier and gasped in sheer shock. Wait, are you dead serious right now? You're actually dumping Mia and going home to marry some other girl? Dude, does Mia even know about this? Before the echo of his shout could even fade, the VIP door swung wide open, and Mia Bennett's sharp voice cut through the room. What the hell was I supposed to know? When Mia Bennett suddenly walked in, the whole room just stared at each other in total silence. Leave it to Sarah Young to break the ice with a laugh and switch gears. Well, look who it is. Who dragged our brilliant Dr. Bennett out of her cave? Did you grab a card yet? Sarah asked. Seeing Mia's confused frown, she smiled and explained. Finn has been super into tarot reading lately. We all have to pull one. He is totally using us as his little guinea pigs to test out how accurate his psychic skills are. Right on cue, Finn strutted over, shuffling a deck of cards with crazy excitement in his eyes. Come on, hurry up. Pick one, everybody. I casually pulled a card from the deck. Seeing me play along, Mia, who had been swept up in the crowd since she got here, finally caved and reached out too. Sarah, who started this whole fortune-telling craze in the first place, immediately jumped in on the teasing. Hurry up. Let the great seer Finn take a look. Show us what you got. Let us see if this guy is actually legit. Honestly, I was a little curious myself. I flipped my card over, and the bold text stared right back at me. If your heart is full of expectation, you will end up with nothing. But if you ask for nothing, you will walk away with a bountiful harvest. Reading those words, my smile completely froze. Damn, it was not wrong. I quietly handed the card back to Finn. Finn read the eerie message and gave my shoulder a comforting buddy-to-buddy pat. Hey man, the first half sounds pretty brutal, but look at the second part. It says a huge, unexpected joy is coming, right? Just chill. Do not take it so seriously. I nodded along. Then, I watched Mia draw her card from the deck. She flipped it over, and the words on it practically made my blood run cold. The rest of the group went dead silent. After a painfully awkward pause, one of my buddies snatched the card right out of her hand. The second he read the cursed message, his face dropped, and he hurriedly shoved the card back to Finn. Come on, psychic Finn. Your skills are total garbage, he joked nervously. Everyone in this room knows his relationship with Mia is completely rock solid. How could Mia possibly lose the love of her life forever? But reading those words out loud still made a few of my buddies shift around with super awkward expressions. The cold, hard truth? Why wouldn't it be possible for her to lose the love of her life forever? I was already packing my bags mentally to leave this city, dump Mia for good, and marry someone else entirely. It was just that no one in this room actually knew my secret yet. Soon enough, the whole room was echoing with laughter, everyone roasting Finn for his totally bogus tarot reading. Amid all the loud joking and messing around, no one was really paying attention to us anymore. But right then, a faint cell phone ring managed to pierce through the noisy room. Mia somehow caught the sound instantly, pulled out her phone, and answered the call without missing a beat. I had absolutely zero clue what was being said on the other end of the line. I just watched her face drop. Then, her panicked eyes locked straight onto me. Get up. You are coming with me to the hospital right now. I had no idea why the hell we needed to go there, but seeing her deadly serious expression, I bit my tongue and did not ask for details. I rushed out of the private room, trailing right behind her. We jumped in the car and practically flew all the way down the streets toward the hospital. Every single time we hit a red light or got stuck in traffic, she laid on the horn like a maniac. The pure panic on her face proved just how terrified and desperate she was at that moment. A drive that easily should have taken half an hour was slashed down by her to just over 10 minutes of pure madness. The second we pulled up to the hospital, she did not utter a single word. She just grabbed me and dragged me straight up to the rooftop. The moment we burst through the roof doors, my stomach dropped. A massive, unhinged man was leaning against the railing, tightly gripping a hunting knife. He was holding Ethan Holt hostage. Ethan was crying his eyes out, absolutely terrified. But the second he saw Mia show up, a flicker of desperate hope lit up his pathetic eyes. "Mia, please, save me," Ethan whimpered. I was still trying to process what the hell was happening when, in the next second, 2 hands shoved me violently forward. Mia's chillingly familiar voice echoed right behind my back. "Look closely at him. This guy is my real boyfriend. The man you are holding hostage is completely innocent. He means absolutely nothing to me. Even if you kill him, it will not change a damn thing. If you want leverage, you need to take my boyfriend hostage instead." Hearing those vicious words spill from her mouth, the sick reality finally clicked in my brain. The only reason she sped like a lunatic to drag me here was simply to trade my life to guarantee Ethan's safety. Listening to the panicked murmurs from the crowd of onlookers, I quickly pieced together the sickening truth behind today's nightmare. This maniac was just out looking for trouble. He had been stalking them for the past few days, and because he saw Mia clinging to Ethan every single day, he assumed the worst. He completely mistook Ethan for her boyfriend and took him hostage to get revenge. I felt like someone had just dumped a bucket of freezing ice water over my head. My entire body went numb and completely ice cold. But right behind me, Mia just kept shoving me closer to the knife, not giving a damn if I lived or died. It was absolutely hilarious. My own girlfriend spent every waking moment with another man, and the instant things got dangerous, she threw me to the wolves without a single second of hesitation, all just to shield her precious late professor's son. The attacker looked down at Ethan shivering in his grip, and then glared at me stumbling forward. Maybe he had spotted me in the background while stalking them before, because even though he looked suspicious, the deadly grip he had on that knife unconsciously loosened just a tiny bit. He glanced around nervously, weary and cornered, fully preparing to let me walk right into his trap to swap out the hostage. But out of nowhere, the second the criminal loosened his grip, a swarm of cops ambushed him from every direction. One officer moved like lightning, kicking the blade right out of his hand. Another dragged Ethan Holt to safety, and then there was Mia. The absolute second Ethan was in the clear, Mia sprinted straight past me and threw herself at him. "Ethan, oh my God, are you okay?" Still trembling like a leaf, Ethan clung to her, sobbing like a baby. "Mia," I was terrified. She stayed right there, completely wrapped up in making sure her precious Ethan was safe. Did it even cross her mind that she had literally just shoved me into the line of fire? Only after she had comforted him did she finally glance my way, a complete afterthought, and ask, "Are you all right?" But as I stared back at her, there was absolutely nothing left in my eyes but dead, cold emptiness. Now, Mia was never the type to justify her actions. 9 times out of 10, she couldn't care less about anyone else's feelings. But seeing me standing there, so utterly lifeless, even she looked a little rattled. For a split second, you could see it on her face, the realization that things were actually slipping right out of her control. "Zach, listen," she started, her voice steady. "They had backup nearby. As long as you stepped up to distract the guy, the cops were going to move in. It was just a strategy." Her words were incredibly logical, so perfectly calculated. I didn't even try to argue. Yeah, she was right. It was just a tactical move. After all, I walked away without a scratch, right? But what if I hadn't? What kind of girlfriend does that? How could she be so incredibly calm about trading her own boyfriend's life for some other guy's? Looking at her right then, it felt like staring at a total stranger. I told myself, "Zach Lawson, take a good hard look. This is the woman you risked absolutely everything for, the one you gave up your whole life for, to settle down in this massive, unfamiliar city." Was it a massive mistake? Yeah, I definitely thought so. But hey, luckily, it wasn't too late to hit the reset button on my life. In the days that followed, Mia kept making excuses, claiming Ethan had only been taken hostage because of her, and the poor guy was severely traumatized. So, naturally, she glued herself to Ethan's side around the clock, completely forgetting that on that exact same day, she had shoved me right at a knife-wielding maniac. But whatever. I had already decided to walk away from this toxic mess of a relationship. I was completely done shedding tears for her. Left alone in our apartment yet again, I started systematically clearing out anything and everything that screamed Mia Bennett. I even dragged out the expensive pre-wedding photos we had taken a while back. Without hesitating, I pulled every single one of those pictures out and tossed them right into the fireplace, one after another. I stood there, watching the flames devour the memories. Once they were reduced to ashes, I finally turned my attention to the rest of the room. In the past, I had done everything imaginable just to get a little closer to Mia. I had bought so much cheesy matching couple stuff for us. The matching toothbrushes and mugs sitting side by side on the bathroom sink, the perfectly color-coordinated towels with those stupidly cute embroidery patterns. Then there were the matching couple shirts taking up space in the closet, and those ridiculous engraved bracelets. I tossed every last bit of it into heavy cardboard boxes. Then, I carried them straight out to the trash. Starting today, I would never, ever need any of this garbage again. Once my life was completely purged of her, I pulled out my suitcase and finally started packing my own bags. I had honestly poured my heart into treating this apartment like my true home. I used to want every single corner of this place to have a piece of me in it. I genuinely believed that if I left my mark everywhere, Mia would unconsciously think of me every time she looked around. I thought that, over time, she would finally accept me, actually fall in love with me, and realize she couldn't live without me. But right up to the bitter end, I had completely failed. There was just so much stuff to sort through, and my packing slowly started dragging on. So when Mia finally waltzed back into the apartment that night, I was still only halfway done. She pushed the bedroom door open, and the very first thing she saw was half my wardrobe scattered across the bed. I jumped a little at her sudden arrival. While my brain scrambled for an excuse to explain away the giant pile of clothes, she surprisingly spoke first. "What is all this? Are you heading out on a business trip?" I froze for a second, then quickly turned my back to her, acting like I was just organizing some shirts. Where she couldn't see my face, a bitter, mocking smirk spread across my lips. I had already quit my job. What imaginary business trip was I supposed to be taking? It clearly never even crossed her mind that there was a chance I was actually leaving her for good. But you know what? That was perfectly fine by me. I absolutely did not want to get into it with her, so I just gave a vague hum of agreement. Seeing me play along, Mia completely dropped the subject. She just casually asked, "So, when are you leaving?" I paused for a beat. I didn't see any reason to hide this part. First thing tomorrow morning. Mia didn't utter another word. She just spun on her heel and walked out of the bedroom. Out of nowhere, she actually decided to cook dinner. Her food was always incredible, but because she was perpetually obsessed with work, she almost never bothered making a meal. Because of that, getting a home-cooked meal from her was like finding a needle in a haystack. Lately, though, she had been cooking up a storm, but every single one of those gourmet dishes went straight to Ethan, without exception. After we finished eating in silence, Mia pulled out a sleek little gift box from behind her back and held it out to me. Staring at the box shoved in my face, I shot her a genuinely surprised look. She literally never did sweet things like this, but I kept my hands to myself and didn't take it. Instead, I looked her dead in the eye and asked, "What do you want? Is this about what happened last time?" She looked down. "I am sorry." Mia Bennett hesitated for a second, probably remembering the dark look on my face when I walked out. Still, she managed an apology. That was when it hit me. That was why she had been acting so damn weird all day. But honestly, I had already decided to hand her over to Ethan Holt. So, whether she went out of her way to protect Ethan or not, it just did not matter to me anymore. My reaction was so completely deadpan that Mia actually looked a little taken aback. But, eager to get her little speech off her chest, she just brushed past my silence. She kept going. "Ethan has been in a really dark place lately. I took a few days off work, and, well, I plan to spend some extra time with him." As she said it, she sneaked another glance at me, trying to gauge my reaction, but my face was like stone. There was zero rage. A few months ago, I would have blown up the second I heard she was running off to see Ethan Holt. But now, there was absolutely no anger sitting across the table from her. My heart was totally at peace. Seriously, what kind of reaction was I supposed to give her? In the past, no matter what I asked for, whether it was my birthday, a major holiday, our anniversary, or even when I was lying in bed, sick or injured, she never, ever agreed to take a single day off to stay by my side. But now, Ethan Holt was just feeling a little down, and she dropped everything to take time off for him. What else was there left to say? Do whatever you want. After tossing those 4 cold words at her, I shut my mouth. For once in her life, Mia actually stood up and initiated a hug. "Ethan is my late professor's son," she whispered. "After his dad passed away, he has just been a total wreck. And this time, he got really spooked again. Once I help him get through this rough patch, everything will go back to normal. I promise I will make it up to you later, okay?" I did not say yes, but I did not say no either. I mean, how could there possibly be a later for us? Early the next morning, Mia saw my suitcase parked by the front door. Feeling guilty, she actually went out of her way to buy us some breakfast. "I will drive you to the airport later," she offered. I did not say a word. I just sat down at the table and quietly chewed my food. After eating, right as I was grabbing my jacket to leave, she suddenly looked down as her phone buzzed. Instantly, she gave me the exact excuse I knew was coming. "Zach, something urgent came up. I cannot drive you." I did not even have to guess. The person texting her was 100% Ethan Holt. "Go handle it," I said flatly. Seeing that I was perfectly fine with it, Mia dropped all her guilt. She turned on her heel and headed out. But right before stepping through the door, she glanced back over her shoulder. "Text me when you are coming back. I will pick you up then." And with that, she walked out without a second glance. I watched her figure slowly fade out of sight. Then, I whispered into the empty room, "Mia Bennett, I am never coming back." I took one last, long look around. This was the house I had called home for 6 straight years. I remembered how thrilled and hopeful I felt on moving day, but I also remembered the crushing loneliness and sadness of being left alone in this house night after night. Now, like a heavy fog lifting, all of that baggage dissolved into pure relief as I made my final choice to leave. In the end, I left a simple note on the dining table. "Mia, we are done. I am moving back home to get married." After writing that, I grabbed my suitcase from the hallway, walked out, and quietly hailed a cab to the airport. From this second forward, Zach Lawson was officially erased from Mia Bennett's life. Fast forward through a grueling several-hour flight, and we finally touched down in South City. I steered my luggage with one hand and unlocked my phone with the other. I checked a text notification that had just popped up. It read, "I am already at the airport. Are you here yet?" I quickly texted back, "Just landed." Right as the message sent, I looked up into the busy terminal and spotted Sophie Reed. She was rocking a stunning dress and bold red lipstick. Every single move she made just screamed high-class elegance. She kept glancing down at her glowing screen, then eagerly looking back up at the arriving passengers. In that massive, crowded lobby, her eyes were desperately searching for me. The second I stepped through the gates, her face lit up. She waved frantically and practically strutted over. I could not hide the absolute shock flashing across my face. Seriously, who could have predicted this? The same tomboy who used to trail behind me, constantly bickering and arguing, turned into this absolute bombshell. "What? Did you lose your voice?" The gorgeous woman stopped right in front of me, her voice dripping with playful sarcasm and a massive smirk. "Once we sign that marriage certificate, you can stare at me all day long." Catching myself drooling like an idiot, the tips of my ears instantly burned red. I coughed, trying to play it cool, and rolled my eyes at her. The banter just slipped out naturally. "It has been years, and you are somehow still this insanely narcissistic." She just laughed, seamlessly linking her arm through mine as she dragged me toward the exit. Hey, if I have the goods, why can I not be full of myself? For a second there, I was completely speechless. Looking at her glowing, drop-dead gorgeous face, I could not even argue. She really was breathtakingly beautiful. Growing up, she had always been the absolute it girl on campus. Top-tier grades and a perfect face to match. Even back in the day, she had this confident, mature vibe that drove all the guys at school absolutely crazy. She carried herself like this seasoned heartbreaker, but secretly, she was incredibly innocent. Every time some poor guy confessed to her, she would shoot him down with intense, dramatic seriousness. Back then, we were just students. As far as I was concerned, our only real job was to bury our heads in the books and study hard. Who had the time to care about all that messy drama? Once high school was in the rearview mirror, we just went our separate ways. I wasn't exactly keeping tabs on her, but rumors still trickled in rumors that she hadn't dated a single soul since. That memory hit me out of nowhere. I snapped my head up, looking right at her, and asked, "Back in the day, everyone thought I was just messing around. So why on earth did you agree to something so completely ridiculous?" By the time the question left my mouth, we had hit the parking lot and stopped dead in front of her car. Sophie just smirked and popped the passenger door open for me. I slid in. She strolled around to the driver's side, dropped into the seat, and arched one perfect eyebrow at me. "I figured you already knew," she said. "Knew what exactly?" My brain was scrambling. I scowled at her, completely lost. She took one look at my totally clueless face and let out this soft, barely there sigh. Then, she just looked straight ahead, completely dodging my question. We rolled out of the lot in heavy silence. Right when I was dead, certain she was going to ice me out, she broke it. "It's not exactly the first time you've pulled a stunt this ridiculous," she tossed out in her usual annoyingly playful tone. So, naturally, I took it totally seriously. She paused. Right on cue, the traffic light up ahead flickered yellow, then flashed red. We coasted to a smooth stop. She turned her head slowly, pinning me with a gaze that had this faint, teasing smile behind it. "Besides, what if," she murmured, "what if it was real? Then I would have just scored the absolute jackpot." But it was her earlier words that had me freezing up. Not the first time? My mind went into absolute overdrive, the gears grinding violently. The second my eyes locked onto hers, it all finally clicked, like a lightning bolt. Sophie was talking about the time I threw everything away and stayed in Harbor City for Mia, and what she said next drove the nail right into the coffin. The realization hit me like a massive, delayed punch to the gut. I felt the tips of my ears burning up, burning hot. "Wait," I stammered out, sounding totally awkward. You don't actually like me, do you?" The light flipped green. The car lurched forward, and her soft, breathless laugh filled the cabin. "Yeah," she confessed. "I've liked you for a really, really long time. Way longer than you ever carried a torch for Mia. Back then, we were just dumb kids who didn't know any better. I honestly thought, if I could just grab your attention, I could finally make you see how I felt about you. But who knew you were such an absolute blockhead? Not only did you run off completely alone to the middle of nowhere, but you actually stayed there, all for a woman who couldn't have cared less about you. Luckily for you. I had just enough patience to wait until you finally came crawling back to my side." Sophie kept the heaviest part of that confession locked away in her heart. But honestly, just those 6 words alone were enough to leave me completely paralyzed in my seat. I didn't snap out of my daze until we finally rolled to a stop in my neighborhood parking lot. I looked at her, asking barely above a whisper, "When did it all start?" But this time, she just played with me. She deliberately dodged the question, keeping me hanging. That old, frustratingly familiar feeling came rushing right back. Totally speechless, I just popped the car door open and climbed out. Sophie shadowed me instantly. She strolled right by my side, acting like she was my personal bodyguard. Our houses were basically right next door to each other anyway. We walked the exact same path home. Once we stepped into the elevator, the silence was deafening. I just kept my eyes glued to the floor, fighting to keep a totally stoic face. She just leaned back against the wall, super relaxed, staring a hole right through me. Under that intense gaze of hers, my ears flared up all over again. Ding! The elevator doors finally slid open. Sophie escorted me right to my front door, blocking me from taking another step. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that even though I was a guy, I could still get massively flustered. A sly little smirk tugged at the corners of her mouth. She reached up, gently ruffling my hair like a puppy. Then, right before I could even snap at her, she slipped away, spinning on her heel to head home. But before she vanished, she threw one last bomb over her shoulder. "In just a couple of days, I'm bringing my folks over to hash out our wedding plans. Little Mouse, you had better be ready." That insanely teasing nickname instantly set my ears on fire the second they had just cooled down. I just rolled my eyes hard at her back. Snatching out my key, I unlocked the door and shoved it open without giving her the satisfaction of a comeback. Not that Sophie cared. She was practically floating on air, humming to herself as she made a beeline for the stairwell. Her place was literally just one floor up. Honestly, with how insanely hyped she was right now, climbing 20 flights of stairs wouldn't even faze her. I dragged my heavy suitcase inside. 6 full years. It had been 6 whole years since I last stepped foot in this place. Standing there, this overwhelming, strange wave of warmth and familiarity washed right over me. The living room was completely empty. The scraping sound of my suitcase wheels dragging across the hardwood echoed so loudly in that dead, quiet space. Hearing the sudden commotion out in the hall, my gray-haired old grandpa actually thought some thug was breaking in. He came charging out, gripping his wooden cane like a weapon, his voice booming with absolute authority. "What little punk dares to break into the Lawson family home?" he roared, before freezing. "Zach?" The heavy cane hit the floor with a loud, hollow thud. Grandpa didn't even care about the dropped cane. His tough old eyes instantly welled up bright red. But being the stubborn man he was, he swiftly turned his back and started marching toward his room. I just dropped my suitcase right there and bolted after him. Right as he crossed the threshold, I grabbed him, pulling that stubborn old man into a desperate, bone-crushing hug. "Grandpa, I missed you so much," I choked out, but the old man just scoffed, clearly not buying it. "You little brat. When you left, you swore you were just heading off to school. You promised you'd come back to see me during your breaks." But he had waited and waited, and that agonizing wait dragged on for 6 whole years. Sure, he knew I was finally coming back soon, but he had absolutely no idea exactly when. He only knew it would be sometime around now. Because of that, he was only mildly shocked when he first laid eyes on me. But get this, the news of my return hadn't even come from me. It was Sophie Reed who told him. Meanwhile, this ungrateful brat me hadn't bothered to call him even once. In his mind, I had probably completely forgotten about this poor old man ages ago. And yet, here I was, having the nerve to claim that I missed him. Thinking about all that, Grandpa let out a bitter snort and stubbornly refused to even look at me. He actually started shoving me, trying to pry me off, but I just held on for dear life. My tears fell, one by one, soaking right through Grandpa's shirt. Feeling that warm dampness on his shoulder, the tension finally left him, and he let out a heavy sigh. He finally stopped fighting me off, but his sharp tongue still refused to let me off the hook. "You say you miss me? Then why on earth didn't you come home for 6 whole years? You just abandoned this useless old man all alone, never checking in, never even caring if I was okay. If it wasn't for that sweet girl from the Reed family checking on me every single day, you probably wouldn't even know when I kicked the bucket." His trembling voice was thick with built-up resentment, but I panicked and hurriedly clamped my hand right over his mouth. I quickly spat a few times to ward off the horrible jinx. I glared at him, my eyes full of fierce disapproval. "Grandpa, don't say that. You're going to live to be 100. You are absolutely not allowed to say such unlucky things." But the moment his heartbreaking words truly sank in, a crushing wave of guilt washed completely over my heart once again. "I'm so sorry, Grandpa," I whispered, my voice breaking. "It was all my fault. I promise, I won't ever leave you again. I'll stay right by your side from now on, okay?" But the second I said that, Grandpa frantically shook his head. "Bah, what kind of ridiculous nonsense are you spouting now? Your old grandpa is still waiting to see you get married and have a bunch of kids. I have to see you truly happy with my own 2 eyes. Only then can I leave this world in peace, so I can finally meet your grandmother and your parents again with a clear conscience." I squeezed him tighter. "Grandpa, I just told you, no more unlucky talk." Hearing my grandfather constantly bring up his own passing just made my heart ache even more than it already did. Deep down, I knew he would inevitably leave me one day, but I desperately prayed that day would come much later, just a little bit later. After we talked things out for a while, the heavy, suffocating tension finally lifted. Grandpa looked at me, his eyes welling up with deep emotion all over again. "You've really grown up, you've lost so much weight, and you've changed. he murmured softly. "But no matter how much you change, you will always be my precious grandson." I leaned my head against his frail shoulder, and for the first time in years, my chaotic heart finally found peace. Grandpa chuckled a few times, lightening the mood. But then, remembering my impending marriage, that familiar worry crept right back into his voice. "Wait, didn't you tell me you were just about to get married? Why did you suddenly pack up and come back here?" I just shook my head, really not wanting to dive too deep into that miserable disaster. We just weren't right for each other," I admitted quietly. "So, the wedding was completely called off." Seeing Grandpa's face fall with fresh worry, a sudden thought struck me what Sophie Reed had said before I left. After hesitating for a long moment, biting my lip, I finally decided to hit him with the real, undeniable truth. Actually, Sophie Reed said she's bringing her parents over in a couple of days. They want to officially discuss our wedding. The very second those words left my mouth, Grandpa's eyes bugged out of his head. His gears turned furiously for a long, silent moment before the reality of what I just said actually clicked. Then, he threw his head back and burst into thunderous, joyous laughter. "Ha! That poor girl has waited so bitterly for all these years, and she actually managed to hold out until you finally came to your senses." Meanwhile, back in Harbor City, when my ex, Mia Bennett, finally returned home, it was already the dead of night on the third day. She pushed the front door open, stepping into pitch-black darkness. Instinctively, she called out my name, but as the seconds ticked by little, the empty room answered with nothing but dead silence. Flicking on the lights, she stared at the empty living room. It looked exactly the same as the day she had carelessly left it. Only then did it suddenly hit her that I was supposed to be away on a business trip, and speaking of which, she realized I hadn't contacted her a single time over these past few days. I had specifically promised to tell her exactly when I was coming back so she could pick me up, but my phone had been completely radio silent. Frowning, Mia slowly walked into the living room, pulling out her phone and scrolling right to our chat history. At a glance, the screen was flooded with my old messages, times when I desperately wished I could talk to her, blowing up her phone. Sometimes, I excitedly shared random, interesting things from work. Sometimes, I just shared mundane little bits of my daily life. And sometimes, I would practically beg, cautiously asking if she was willing to just spend a little time with me. Sometimes, I would vent and complain about all the crappy, unlucky things that ruined my day. And her replies, they were practically non-existent. On the rare occasion she did respond, it was always a cold, indifferent, got it, or okay. Half the time she just left me on read. Yet, like an absolute fool who never got tired of being ignored, I still kept bombarding her with messages every single day without fail. But when her eyes darted to the timestamps, her breath hitched. The very last message I had sent her was from over half a month ago. Had I really ghosted her for that long? A sudden creeping uneasiness coiled tightly around her heart. For the very first time in our relationship, she swallowed her pride and actually took the initiative to text me. "Are you finally done with work? When exactly are you coming back?" The message showed as delivered, but my side remained completely, chillingly silent for a long time. Feeling a heavy knot of dread forming in her stomach, she glanced at the clock. It was already 11 at night. Mia Bennett finally let out a long, heavy sigh of relief. She convinced herself it was probably just way too late at night. That had to be the reason I hadn't seen her messages yet. Clinging to that excuse, she tossed her phone onto the bed, but right out of the corner of her eye, she spotted a small piece of paper resting on the table. Frowning in confusion, she walked over, picked it up, and took a closer look. There were barely any words scribbled on the page, yet every single syllable hit like a sledgehammer, smashing right into her chest. "Mia Bennett, let's break up. I am heading back home to get married." Suddenly, it felt like she had completely forgotten how to read. She frantically flipped the note back and forth, desperately searching for a hidden punchline. Surely it had to say something like, "Haha, scared you, didn't I? I was just messing with you." If that were the case, she was fully prepared to rip into me. How on earth could I joke around about breaking up and getting married so casually? But no matter how many times she read it over, the harsh words on that paper didn't disappear. Not a single letter vanished, and not a single word was added. Zach Lawson was actually dead serious. In a flash, Mia's eyes welled up, turning completely red, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She snatched up her phone, snapped a quick picture of the breakup note, and immediately fired it off to me. She was just about to type out a furious text, demanding to know what the hell this meant. That was when she noticed the massive, glaring red exclamation mark popping up right next to her picture. And right underneath it, a tiny, ruthless line of text confirmed her worst nightmare. The other party has enabled friend verification. Mia's brain completely short-circuited. Her mind went totally blank, and it took her a long, agonizing moment to finally snap back to reality. Zach Lawson had actually deleted her. Her head was spinning in a daze, but her fingers were already moving on autopilot. She aggressively dialed my number and called. Barely a second after the dialing tone rang out, a cold, robotic female voice echoed from the speaker, stating that the user was currently busy on another line. Mia froze dead in her tracks. Zach had just brutally hung up on her. A wave of inexplicable fiery rage immediately boiled up in her chest. But when she angrily mashed the redial button, the call completely failed to connect. I hadn't just hung up, I had mercilessly blocked her number altogether. Mia was completely baffled. What was the big deal? So what if she had been paying a little extra attention to Ethan Holt lately? Did I really need to act like such a jealous, petty loser? She had already made things perfectly clear ages ago. Ethan was just the son of her former mentor. Ever since the professor passed away, Ethan's mental state had been super fragile. What in the world did Zach have to be so triggered about? Besides, when she left to comfort Ethan this time, hadn't I already nodded and agreed to let her go? What kind of childish tantrum was I throwing now? Even in the face of all this, Mia smugly believed I was just throwing a fit for attention. After all, she knew I was absolutely obsessed with her. I had literally uprooted my entire life and settled down in this cold, unfamiliar city, all just to be by her side. There was no way I would actually give up, ditch this place, and just run off to marry someone else. But what Mia failed to grasp was that my departure wasn't sudden at all. She was only just now opening her eyes to the reality of the situation. Totally blocked and unable to reach me, she frantically spammed our college class group chat with questions. But maybe because it was the dead of night, not a single person bothered to give her an answer. Defeated and miserable, she dragged her feet back into the bedroom. It was only when she went to wash her face that it finally hit her. Every single item that used to be a matching pair was now sitting all alone. She threw open the closet doors in a panic. Those adorable couple outfits I had bought for us with such genuine excitement, the ones she had completely ignored, never wearing even once, just burying them at the very bottom like absolute trash, had now all vanished without a trace. She collapsed onto the bed, staring blankly up at the ceiling as her thoughts spun into a chaotic, tangled mess. Her entire world was suddenly turning upside down. How could this even be happening? How could Zach Lawson actually pack up and leave her in the dust? Zach had to just be throwing a massive pity party, right? At worst, she figured she would track me down tomorrow morning and just toss me a quick apology. She'd act sweet, coax me a little, and then I'd come crawling right back like a loyal, obedient dog, wouldn't I? But deep down, Mia was starting to doubt it. Yet in that moment, she was completely powerless. All she could do was wait. She ended up staying wide awake for the entire night. She violently tossed and turned in bed, totally unable to catch even a wink of sleep. Every few minutes, she obsessively checked her glowing screen, praying for a reply. At exactly 12 o'clock the next afternoon, someone finally sent a response. Her eyes darted to the name and the notification popping up in the group chat. The sender was Sarah Young, someone who used to run in Zach Lawson's friend circle. Holding her breath, Mia Bennett opened the chat. Sarah had fired off a highly enthusiastic message attached to an image. But the very second Mia's eyes focused on what the photo actually was, she was struck completely dumb, as if hit by a bolt of lightning. It was a stunning, professional wedding portrait. Right there in the frame, wearing a sharp, flawless white suit, was Zach Lawson, staring adoringly down at his bride. And right there beside him, snuggled intimately into his arms, the bride gazed back up at him. Her eyes were absolutely overflowing with deep tenderness and pure, unadulterated love. And that beautiful woman wasn't Mia. She just stared at the bright screen, completely paralyzed. Her brain shorted out, leaving behind a vast, hollow emptiness. For a terrifying moment, she couldn't even remember where she was. With a sharp ding, a follow-up text rolled in. "Oh, were you looking for Zach? He moved back to his hometown a while ago to tie the knot. I hear the actual ceremony is happening next week. Honestly, doesn't the bride look like an absolute perfect match for him? The wedding was actually happening next week. Text after text hammered into her, catching the once confident Mia Bennett entirely off guard and shattering her world. There was no way she believed Zach would actually marry someone else so abruptly. Besides, he had only just left town. Even if he was tying the knot, the wedding date couldn't possibly be set this fast. He had to be doing this on purpose to make her jealous. It was all a complete fake-out. He was just throwing a tantrum, acting angry, and waiting for her to come running and coax him back. Thinking about this twisted logic, she actually felt a surge of confidence. She quickly pulled herself together, brushing off the panic, but her fingers nervously swiped across her phone screen over and over. After hesitating for a split second, she fired off another text to Sarah. Then, "Do you know where Zach is right now?" Mia originally wanted to track Zach down in person. 4 days had already passed since he walked out. Zach must have been waiting for her, desperately checking his phone by now, right? But just as she went to book a flight, a chilling realization hit her. She had absolutely no idea where his hometown actually was. On the other end of the line, Sarah let out a bitter, mocking laugh when she saw that ridiculous text. Now it all made perfect sense. After Zach had loved Mia for all those years, right when they were supposed to get their happy ending, he just gave up and walked away. They had been together for 6 long years. Zach had sacrificed everything just to stay in Harbor City for her. Yet, this woman didn't even know where he was from. And on top of that, just to save another guy, Mia had literally shoved Zach right into the path of a dangerous criminal. Sure, she had bodyguards on standby, but so what? It didn't change the cold, hard fact that Zach was never, ever her first priority. Disgusted, Sarah cursed her out in her head. When she typed back, she didn't hold back her venom. "Why the hell are you asking? What are you planning to crash his wedding? Give it a rest, Mia. When he was right by your side, you treated him like trash. So do us all a massive favor and stay as far away from Zach as humanly possible." Mia's brows knitted together in intense frustration. Realizing she wasn't going to squeeze a single clue out of Sarah, she angrily swiped out of the chat. Fast forward to exactly 3 days before my wedding, I had already blocked Mia's number a while ago, so when my phone rang, seeing an unfamiliar number pop up, I didn't think much of it and just picked it up. But the very next second, I instantly regretted it. "Zach, I've been searching everywhere for you. You finally picked up." Hearing Mia's desperate voice, I froze, giving her absolutely nothing but silence. Without a drop of hesitation, I moved to hang up, but the woman must have read my mind. She panicked, rushing to stop me. "Zach, wait, don't hang up. I know I made you mad before, but please, just tell me where you are. I'll come find you, okay?" She tried her absolute hardest to sound soft and sweet, practically begging me to believe her fake apology. Until another voice drifted through my end of the line. A sweet, slightly soft voice that carried a tiny hint of a playful pout. "Honey? Who's on the phone? Why are you taking so long?" The exact second the word honey dropped, Mia felt like she'd been struck by a bolt of lightning. But what shattered her reality even more was the brutal fact that I didn't even try to deny it. I just looked back and answered casually, "Oh, it's no one important." Right then and there, Mia finally learned that words could literally kill a person from the inside out. No one important. Those 3 little words were like a bomb going off, leaving a deafening, agonizing ringing in her ears. After that, her brain short-circuited. She couldn't hear a single thing we said, completely drowning in her own shock. When the call finally disconnected, a memory suddenly clawed its way into her mind. Not too long ago, when I left my phone on her living room table, she saw an incoming call. The contact name I had saved on the screen was literally wife. How on earth had she just brushed that off and shoved it to the back of her mind? Oh, right. Ethan had smugly convinced her that guys just saved their close bros as wife as an inside joke. But putting the pieces together now, the brutal truth was staring her in the face. That wasn't some guy best friend at all. It was the exact same woman from the phone call. A terrifying, suffocating wave of rage totally overwhelmed her. But in that moment, Mia was completely powerless to do anything about it. She didn't even bother calling back. She knew damn well I had instantly blocked that new number too. But wait, she hadn't even agreed to the breakup yet. How could Zach just go out and replace her with someone else so easily? Why did this relationship only start because Zach said he liked her, and then end just because he decided he was done? Her eyes darkened with obsession, leaving only one crazy thought echoing in her mind. She wasn't about to just roll over and give up. Driven by pure desperation, Mia tracked down my old college class monitor. Through him, she actually managed to dig up my home address. But just as she grabbed her keys to hunt me down, her phone suddenly buzzed. She pulled it out. The name Ethan Holt flashed brightly across the glowing screen. After a brief, agonizing hesitation, old habits kicked in. She spun around, heading straight to Ethan first. She figured it was no big deal, she'd just handle his drama super fast. And then, she would make a beeline straight for me to crash the party. There was no way in hell she'd let me marry someone else. But what Mia stubbornly failed to realize was that this little detour would end up trapping her for 3 whole days. By the time she finally wrapped up Ethan's pathetic mess, she checked the calendar and froze. The date had already caught up to the exact day I chose for my wedding. 3 days, gone in the blink of an eye, and with it, her final chance. Sophie Reed and I hosted our wedding reception at a gorgeous hotel just around the corner from our place. Sure, the timeline was an absolute rush, but there was no way I was going to cut corners on my own big day. Every single detail we needed for the wedding had been mapped out to absolute perfection. Honestly, as the groom, I barely had to lift a finger or stress over a single thing. When the big day finally arrived, Sophie and I headed to the hotel bright and early to get dressed up and sit through hair and makeup. When it came to greeting the guests, Sophie totally passed the torch to our parents. She just wanted to stick right by my side, every single step of the way. Sitting there in front of the vanity mirror, I caught Sophie staring at me without even blinking. I could not help but feel a little curious. Sophie, you really planned all of this out perfectly. You didn't just start putting this together after I came back, did you? Hearing my question, she awkwardly cleared her throat and quickly looked away. Well, of course it wasn't a last-minute thing. She had actually been planning this with me in mind for a really long time. The bridal suite, the stunning dress, even the custom wedding bands, they had all been locked down ages ago. If I had ended up marrying someone else, she never would have let those things see the light of day. But since I was marrying her, she brought everything straight to the table. As for the finer details, well, that is what she had just started finalizing. From the exact moment I announced that I wanted to swap brides, even though Sophie kept her mouth shut. The second she avoided my gaze, I already knew the truth deep down. But honestly, that just made me even more insanely curious. She had already confessed her feelings for me, but she flat out refused to tell me when she actually started liking me. Her lips were completely sealed on that one. It always gave me this sneaking suspicion that there was some huge secret I was totally missing. The moment Sophie turned her head back around, she caught the look on my face. She instantly knew I was totally overthinking things again. Right at that moment, the stylist finally finished up my groom's prep. As she packed away her kit, she could not stop praising me. "Mr. Lawson, your skin is absolutely flawless. You barely even needed a touch-up. Honestly, this is the easiest groom's look I have done in over 10 years working in this industry." Sophie stepped right up and planted a soft kiss on my lips. It was just a quick peck, but my face instantly burned bright red. Sophie took one look at my flushed, shy face and beamed with total satisfaction. A massive grin spread across her lips. "Well, duh. Just look whose husband he is." In the very next second, I playfully smacked her on the back of the head. She pouted, "Hey, I am your wife. How could a husband hit his own bride?" She clutched her head and let out a dramatic, pained wail. It freaked me out so much that I actually thought I had used too much force and hurt her. But who would have guessed? The second I reached out to make sure she was okay, she yanked me straight into her arms. "Honey, why are you still calling me by my full name?" Her totally fake, overly dramatic pout just made me roll my eyes in fond annoyance. The makeup artist watched us goofing off like a pair of idiots and could not help but bust out laughing. After warning us about 1,000,000 times not to ruin the makeup, she finally slipped out of the lounge, giving us newlyweds some privacy. The two of us kept messing around for a little while longer. It was not until the ceremony was just about to kick off that Sophie finally stepped out of the room. Just then, my phone, which I had tossed on the table, started buzzing like crazy. I glanced down and saw an unsaved number flashing on the screen. My gut reaction? It had to be Mia Bennett. So, I immediately swiped to decline the call. But barely a second later, the exact same number rang again. After thinking it over for a second, I realized that not every single unknown caller in the world was necessarily my toxic ex. There was seriously no reason for me to avoid every random number like the plague just because of Mia. So, I caved and finally picked up. Sure enough, a totally unfamiliar voice came through the speaker. "Hello? May I ask if I am speaking with Mr. Zach Lawson?" I gave a quick yes and stayed completely silent. I was just waiting to see what this random person actually wanted. Once she confirmed it was me, the woman on the line got straight to the point. "This is the emergency room over at South City Hospital. Here is the situation. Your girlfriend, Miss Bennett, was just involved in a severe car crash because she was speeding. Her current condition is not looking great. Can you get down to South City Hospital right away?" Hearing those words, my entire body froze for a second. It took me a solid minute to actually process what this nurse was telling me. Mia Bennett had rushed to South City and completely wrecked her car going way over the speed limit. "Hello? Mr. Lawson? Are you still on the line?" When she met dead silence, the nurse spoke up again to snap me out of it. That finally dragged my thoughts back to reality. I opened my mouth and shot her down cold. "I am sorry, but she and I broke up a long time ago. I am actually getting married today, so there is zero chance I can come down there. Please go ahead and try contacting someone else." Without skipping a beat, I hung up, even though I could take a pretty good guess at why she did it. Mia rushing down to South City like a maniac was probably 100% about me. But just like I told the nurse, we were utterly and permanently done. Whatever drama she got herself into was absolutely none of my business anymore. She had a million other people she could cry to for help. She definitely did not need me. Back at the hospital, as the dial tone beeped endlessly, the nurse in charge of family contacts was left standing there looking incredibly awkward. Just then, the attending doctor rushed over, urgently demanding to know if she had managed to get a hold of the patient's family yet. The nurse just shook her head and kept dialing. Honestly, who could have seen this coming? The guy saved in the patient's phone as boyfriend was not just her ex, he was literally walking down the aisle with someone else at that exact moment. By the time the hospital finally got a hold of Mia Bennett's parents, a whole hour had dragged by. Hearing that their precious daughter had been in a horrific car crash, her legs brutally crushed beneath the wreckage, suffering severe nerve compression and necrosis, and that she urgently needed a double amputation to survive, the poor couple felt like they had been struck by a bolt of lightning. Shaking with panic, they booked the very next flight straight to South City. With the family finally in the loop and the surgical consent form signed, the doctors could finally rush her into the operating room with peace of mind. Meanwhile, miles away, my wedding banquet was packed to the brim with cheering guests. Sophie Reed, glowing in a gorgeous trailing gown, walked step by step toward me at the altar. Grandpa had always nagged me, saying he just wanted to see me find a good woman I could trust with my life. Yet, now that the big day was actually here, the tough old man could not hold back his tears. "Grandpa, why are you crying?" I teased gently. "Today is supposed to be a happy day." I tried to play it cool, but the second I saw his reddened eyes, my own vision started getting blurry, too. Swallowing the heavy lump of emotion in my throat, I flashed him a bright smile. "Besides, our new place is not that far away. Even after I tie the knot, I can still come back and hang out with you all the time, right?" Grandpa caught the tears threatening to spill from my eyes. He patted my hand warmly. "Do not cry, boy. Neither of us should be shedding tears today." That long walk down the aisle felt incredibly short in that fleeting moment. Grandpa stared at our joined hands and spoke with intense earnestness. "Zach, from this day forward, you step up and take good care of your wife. You two must love each other fiercely and stick together for a lifetime." We promised we would not cry, but by the time he finished, his raspy voice was choking on sobs. Time really was a cruel thief. In the blink of an eye, my invincible grandpa had turned into a frail old man, and the little brat who used to nap on his knees had finally grown into a man. I was officially taking a wife. Beside me, Sophie gave a deeply solemn nod. Dropping her usual playful, carefree vibe, she squeezed my hand tight. When she looked up at me, her eyes were absolutely overflowing with tender love. "Do not worry at all, Grandpa. I will take amazing care of Zach. I promise I will never let down your expectations, and I will never, ever give up on him." Wrapped in the loud, joyful blessings of our guests, Sophie Reed and I officially became true husband and wife, sealing our futures together. "Zach, I finally married you," she whispered. Meanwhile, later that afternoon, a frantic Ethan Holt followed Mia's parents into South City Hospital, staring down at Mia Bennett's unconscious, broken body. Seeing her daughter like that, Mrs. Bennet completely shattered, unable to hold back her agonizing wails of grief. Her little girl was a brilliant prodigy. At such a young age, she had already climbed the ranks to become an associate chief physician. When Mia finally opened her eyes, how on earth were they supposed to break the news that she would never be able to stand at an operating table again? But no matter how brutal and devastating the truth was, they had no choice but to face the music eventually. A whole agonizing week passed before Mia Bennet finally woke up. The very second her eyes fluttered open, her parents and Ethan Holt were hovering right there. Yet, the one person she desperately wanted to see was nowhere in sight. "Mom? Dad? Have you seen Zach? Did he come to see me?" Just waking up from massive trauma, Mia's breathing was painfully shallow. Her desperate questions tumbled out in weak, broken gasps. Hearing her immediately ask for the ex who dumped her, her parents exchanged a dark, heavy look. They were definitely not thrilled. They bit their tongues hard, swallowing their rage to spare her the heartache. But Ethan? Ethan's eyes were already welling with bitter tears. He slumped dramatically against the hospital bed, sobbing as he shoved his phone in her face, pulling up every single social media post I had uploaded recently. Beneath his fake sympathy, there was a sickeningly smug, venomous sweetness to his voice. "You are literally lying here in ruins because of him. Why are you still thinking about that guy? He has spent the last few days getting married and living it up on his honeymoon. He is having the absolute time of his life. Do you honestly think he still remembers to come see you?" Honestly, Ethan had been plotting against us from day one. He never wanted to see Mia Bennet and me get back together. Now, he was seizing the perfect chance to drive a massive wedge between us and completely shatter her image of me. He threw the brutal truth right in her face, conveniently forgetting she was fresh out of a coma. Her fragile body could not handle a shock like that. Before her panicked parents could even snatch the phone away, Mia Bennet had already locked eyes onto the photo I posted on the exact day her life was violently destroyed. She stared at the screen in pure horror. It was a bright red marriage certificate, proudly displaying my name right next to Sophie Reed's. Her eyes instantly went bloodshot, her heart twisted in agonizing, utter disbelief. How could this be happening? How could this actually be real? He really did it. He got a marriage certificate with another woman. He had genuinely thrown away everything they had, tossing their relationship aside like it was nothing. Then what the hell were those last 6 years of theirs even about? Were they just a joke? Her mind spun, completely unable to process the betrayal. Trembling with desperation, she forced herself up, needing to go find me and demand answers, but the sudden movement made her freeze in absolute terror. Mia Bennet stared at the horrific, jagged scar slashing across her wrist. Her stomach instantly dropped to the floor. Her eyes burned blood red, not just because her right hand felt completely dead and unnatural, but because her legs were entirely numb when she tried to sit up. Shaking like a leaf, she desperately reached out to pull back the heavy hospital blanket, but her parents pinned the sheets down tight. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet stared at her with eyes brimming with absolute heartbreak, frantically shaking their heads to stop her. But how could she not know? She was a doctor herself, and she hadn't blacked out right away during the crash. In the immediate, bloody aftermath of the accident, Mia had seen her own crushed body. It was only because she was still groggy from waking up that her brain had tried to block out the horrifying truth. Her voice broke into a choked sob. She completely ignored Ethan Holt, who was hovering awkwardly in the corner. Instead, she locked eyes with her parents, desperate to squeeze out a different answer than the nightmare she suspected. "Mom, my legs, my hand, they're still fine, right?" But the room fell into a suffocating silence. Her parents just gripped the blanket even tighter, refusing to let her see the devastating reality underneath. Unable to hold it in, Mrs. Bennet broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. The whole room felt paralyzed in a tragic standoff. Finally sensing the suffocating tension in the room, Ethan quietly shoved his phone in his pocket and stepped up, trying to play the hero. "It's okay, Mia. Everything's gonna be fine. I'll always be right here with you." Honestly, if he had just kept his mouth shut, things might have been okay. But the exact second those words left his lips, all the fiery rage Mia had been bottling up exploded right in his face. She viciously shoved Ethan away as he leaned in. Caught totally off guard, he stumbled backward from the sheer force of her anger. The back of his head slammed hard against a nearby hospital chair. He crashed heavily onto the floor, but Mia didn't feel a single ounce of pity for him. If it wasn't for you, why would Zach have ever left me? If it wasn't for you, why would I be a crippled mess in this bed? Get out. Get out right now. Her hysterical screams tore through the room. Ethan's face drained of all color, but he stubbornly glued himself to the floor, refusing to leave. But the moment those explosive words slipped out, her parents' faces dropped. What? What does that mean? They asked. Mia froze instantly, realizing she had just accidentally spilled her own darkest secret. After a long, agonizing pause, she collapsed back against the pillows, totally defeated. Slowly, she confessed everything that had gone down recently, and when her parents heard the whole ugly truth that their daughter had actually run off to have a baby with another man right before her wedding day, their faces twisted in shock, anger, and sheer disbelief. Finally, they just shook their heads, drowning in utter, bitter disappointment. Mia, you've been a perfect daughter your whole life. Why on earth would you do something so incredibly reckless and shameful at a time like this? Mia didn't say a single word. She just buried her face deep in her trembling hands. Muffled, agonizing sobs tore through her fingers. She didn't know either. She had absolutely no idea why she had thrown her life away like that. She had just arrogantly assumed that I loved her unconditionally. She thought I would absolutely never leave her. Seeing her daughter so utterly shattered, Mrs. Bennett couldn't help but feel sorry for her again. And naturally, she shifted the blame onto me. Even if you were completely in the wrong here, Mia, she cried, you only ended up in this crash because you were rushing to see him. Isn't he being way too cold and heartless? Mia wanted to defend me, but the words died in her throat. Deep down, she couldn't help but realize that now that she was crippled and broken, I still wasn't willing to come see her even once. Right at that heavy moment, Ethan suddenly pulled out a diamond ring. Mia, I love you, he pleaded. Just marry me. I'll marry you right now, and I swear I'll take care of you for the rest of your life. That single sentence completely stunned every single person in the room. Mia's mind just went completely blank. Then she instinctively spat out, I will never marry you. Seeing her flat out reject him, Ethan shamelessly turned to beg her parents. But Mia screamed, Mom, Dad, I won't marry him. Mia lay trapped on that hospital bed, squeezing her eyes tightly shut. She completely tuned out her parents' desperate attempts to persuade her. Her parents threw their hands up, feeling totally helpless. Why are you being so insanely stubborn? Ethan really loves you. And look at you now, you need someone to take care of you. Are you seriously still waiting for Zach Lawson to come crawling back? He's already signed a marriage certificate and held a whole damn wedding with someone else. What on earth are you still waiting for? It wasn't that Mia didn't understand the harsh reality her parents were spelling out. She was just absolutely terrified to accept it. Back then, Mia had convinced herself that her feelings for me were nothing more than a comfortable habit. But it was only after I walked away and married another woman that her bleeding, shattered heart finally screamed the truth. Mia Bennett, you are madly in love with Zach Lawson. You cannot survive without Zach Lawson. But just like her father said, I was already happily married to somebody else. Even if she waited forever, it would be a totally hopeless delusion. She clenched her trembling fists until her knuckles turned white. But no matter what they said, she just couldn't force herself to say yes to Ethan. How could she willingly accept this tragic fate when she had been just one step away from happily ever after? Just one single step away. She could have actually married Zach Lawson. Why? How in the world had things spiraled to this point? I honestly knew absolutely nothing about what was going through Mia Bennett's head. After wrapping up our 1-month honeymoon trip, Sophie Reed and I headed back to South City. By the time we made it back to South City, it was already early September. Every single campus was totally swamped with massive crowds of returning students. On the official first day of classes, Sophie Reed was standing right by the front door. I stood closely in front of her, gently buttoning up her shirt for her. She tilted her head up, looking at me with this adorable reluctance in her eyes. Finally, she gave my chest a highly satisfied little pat. I seriously don't get why you insist on dressing so intensely formal, I muttered. You could have easily just dressed down. But she just gave me a completely disapproving look. Instead of arguing, she just playfully reached out and tapped her cheek. Only after I rolled my eyes and planted a soft kiss right on the side of her face did she finally beam with absolute joy and fire back at me. How else am I supposed to show off to my colleagues and my students just how outstanding the husband I married really is? I tried to argue back a few times, but the words just caught in my throat. In the very end, I just gently pushed her out the door with a fake look of annoyance. Fine, fine, just hurry up and get to school already. I honestly wonder if South University completely regrets hiring you as a professor, I teased. They are incredibly lucky to have hired such an amazingly outstanding professor like me. South University should be getting on their knees to thank me. I am both a brilliant graduate and a phenomenal lecturer. Sophie Reed just raised her eyebrow with overwhelming pride. Of course, she never once forgot to sing her own praises. Okay, I get it. I know you are totally amazing. Now you seriously need to head to school, Professor. Don't you dare let your poor students show up on time on the very first day of school, only for you, their own professor, to wind up being the one running late. Sophie Reed, who was actively being shoved out the doorway by me, absolutely didn't mind my pushing at all. She just turned back with an incredibly satisfied grin and finally set off. Lately, a wild new rumor had actually started spreading like wildfire all across South University. Word on the street was that the famously ruthless, smiling tiger of a professor had actually gotten hitched. Because of that, her everyday mood had noticeably improved by a massive margin. Honestly, every single day she was smiling so wildly wide that the corners of her mouth practically stretched all the way to the back of her head. It was only way later, when I dropped by South University to check in on her, that I realized the truth. Ever since we tied the knot, she had basically been shamelessly flexing her wedding ring every single day. Her daily routine basically went a little something like this. You ask why I am dressed up so beautifully today? Oh, it is simply because my wonderful husband likes it. You think my lunch smells delicious today? Well, of course it does. My husband's cooking is absolutely out of this world. What exactly am I planning to do tomorrow? Obviously, I am going on a romantic date with my husband. At that specific moment, however, I was still blissfully unaware of her bragging. I was just sitting there, deeply pondering whether or not I should start hunting for a brand new job soon. So, when a sudden knock echoed from the front door, I felt totally puzzled. I stood up and wandered over to yank the door open. After double-checking that I was the right recipient, the delivery guy shoved a sleek package into my hands. Once I scribbled my signature for it, I walked straight back into the living room. When I finally ripped it open, there was literally nothing but a bright red invitation tucked inside. I slid the thick card out and popped it open. The very first thing that instantly locked onto my line of sight was the two names printed right at the top, Mia Bennett and Ethan Hole. Well. It looks like those two actually ended up together after all. I just couldn't fathom why in the hell their wedding invite had been mailed directly to my doorstep. Were they desperately trying to show off? Or was she trying to scream in my face that even after I brutally walked out on her, she could still effortlessly find another guy to replace me? What the hell did that have to do with my life? I absolutely did not care who that woman was marrying now. I casually tossed the flashy invitation right into the trash pile. I absolutely didn't let that stupid piece of paper get under my skin. Then I went right back to handling my own business. It wasn't until Sophie Reed practically danced back home that afternoon, spotting the fancy invite that had slid onto the floor, that she curiously scooped it back up. Wait, whose invitation is this? Honestly, your dramatic ex-girlfriend is moving a little bit slowly. She casually flipped the heavy card open. After zeroing in on the names printed on it, she slowly arched an intrigued eyebrow. I simply shrugged and snatched the invite right out of her hands, totally ready to dunk it straight into the garbage. Don't even waste your breath worrying about them, I muttered. They are honestly just acting completely inexplicable right now. But she suddenly shot her hand up, lifting the ridiculous invitation high into the air. She cleanly dodged my grab, and a totally wicked, mischievous smile spread across her face as she locked eyes with me. Her voice was dripping with absolute fascination. Well, since they went out of their way to sincerely invite us, let's go crash this thing and take a good look. She was utterly dying to see why on earth they would aggressively send us an invite at a time exactly like this. What the hell was going through Mia Bennett's twisted mind? The big, dramatic wedding was officially scheduled for the following month. Compared to the lavish wedding Sophie Reed and I had pulled off back then, they definitely had way more time to plan, but the final result looked incredibly cheap and totally unsatisfactory. Honestly, I absolutely never expected that I would be dragging myself back to the streets of Harbor City so damn soon. I casually strolled in with Sophie Reed to crash their little wedding banquet. A massive chunk of the guests there actually recognized me, and every single one of them knew the messy history between us. Now that they were all watching me boldly swagger in with a stunning new woman draped on my arm, the entire room erupted into frantic whispering and heated gossip. I honestly never, ever saw this crazy twist coming. In just 3 or 4 incredibly short months, the two people we all swore were absolutely destined to get married actually ended up bitterly marrying completely different people. One of the gossiping guests stared at Sophie Reed and me as we casually claimed a spot to sit down, and they couldn't help but sigh heavily. When I first heard that Zach Lawson had actually married someone else, I completely thought he was the one who had a change of heart. But now, looking at him, it seems like he was just ruthlessly heartbroken. Another nosy guest eagerly jumped right into their whispering circle. With just one single sentence, he instantly hooked the attention of the other two. "What do you mean by that? Come on, spill it." Word on the street is that Mia Bennett's wedding banquet was rushed in such a crazy hurry this time because she is already pregnant with the groom's child. She is already over 2 whole months along. Wait, what? 2 months? If you do the math, that timing lines up perfectly with when Mia Bennett just broke things off with Zach Lawson. Right? No wonder Zach made that viral post about switching brides back then. Maybe this juicy secret was the exact reason. Their gossiping voices were not super loud, but because they were standing pretty close by, I could not catch every single word they said. Still, I definitely heard the part about Mia Bennett being pregnant. A dark, mocking laugh slipped right past my lips. No wonder she actually had the nerve to send me an invitation. So, it was because she was already pregnant over 3 months ago. That had to be right when they claimed they were going in for their IVF treatment. Back then, she had straight up lied to my face, saying her professor had tragically passed away. Turns out, they had never once stopped their little IVF project. Right at that moment, Sophie Reed gently squeezed my hand. When I turned my head, I saw that soft mix of worry and a little hurt lingering in her eyes. I just smiled and shook my head, silently letting her know she did not need to worry about me. Then, I playfully motioned for her to come closer and told her to lower her head. Although she looked a little confused, she still did exactly as I asked. The absolute instant she lowered her head, I planted a soft, quick kiss right on her cheek. Her eyes instantly flew wide open in shock, but I had already turned my head away, playing it cool by not looking at her. But the bright red tips of my ears totally gave away how crazy my own heart was racing in that moment. Not too far away, Mia Bennett took this entire romantic scene in. A chaotic, bitter storm of mixed emotions completely swallowed her heart. Seeing us vibe like this, she could not even lie to herself anymore, pretending I only picked someone else just to spite her. No, it was painfully obvious that I had genuinely fallen hard for Sophie Reed. I fully accepted Sophie into my life. I was even the one boldly taking the initiative to pull her closer to me. This was completely different from my toxic past with Mia. Instead of me just standing there like a fool waiting for Mia Bennett to notice me, Sophie and I were actively walking toward each other. I had finally stepped off into a bright future without her in it. Meanwhile, she was hopelessly drowning in a miserable past that still had me locked inside. Ethan Holt came hurrying right up behind her. His gaze aggressively followed the direction she was staring. In one quick glance, he also spotted Zach Lawson and Sophie Reed. We had our heads bent close together, totally lost in our own little world as if we were whispering sweet nothings. It practically looked like romantic pink bubbles were floating all around the two of us. It was a brutal, glaring contrast to the cold, forced harmony between him and Mia Bennett. Ethan Holt desperately choked down the toxic jealousy and bitter resentment burning in his chest. He slapped a painfully fake smile onto his face. "Mia, it is almost time to hit the stage. Let's go get you ready first." As he spoke, he reached out to grab the handles of her wheelchair, but her eyes stubbornly refused to leave us for what felt like an eternity. Mia Bennett honestly had no clue whether this would be the very last time she ever laid eyes on Zach Lawson. She only knew that after today's wedding wrapped up, any tiny shred of hope between her and Zach would be dead and buried forever. She slowly dropped her gaze, staring miserably at her empty pant legs and the hideous, jagged scar marking her right hand. Crushing grief crashed over her like a massive tidal wave, ripping violently through her shattered heart. Yet, She completely lacked the guts to stop Ethan Holt from rolling her away, too cowardly to even come over and face Zach Lawson. She had already become a complete and utter wreck. Even without this pathetic wedding, even if he had not married someone else, Zach Lawson probably would never love a broken mess like her anymore, right? I could feel someone burning holes into my back from a distance. When I glanced up, I caught sight of Mia Bennett being slowly pushed away by Ethan Holt. I completely froze for a second. I honestly never expected to see her stuck in a wheelchair. Was that horrible outcome from her recent car crash? Had she seriously gotten messed up that badly? Well, my wild guess was quickly confirmed. As the groom finally walked onto the stage, I realized that ever since Mia's accident, I had barely heard a single peep about her recovery. I never thought that crossing paths again would literally be the poster child for the phrase, "everything has changed." I could not even tell if she was hiding any other serious injuries. But hey, even without a fancy medical degree, it was painfully obvious that in this broken state, she was probably never putting a doctor's coat on again. For a split second, a weird, heavy rush of emotion actually hit me. In just 3 short months, our worlds had flipped completely upside down. Up on that brightly lit stage, Mia Bennett's expression was incredibly gloomy. There was zero bridal joy on her face. Honestly, she looked more like somebody owed her several $1,000,000 and ran off without paying her back. Back when Mrs. Holt first found out about Mia being pregnant, she had been just as totally shocked as everyone else. But her first, ruthless instinct was to make Mia abort the baby. Even though Mia had already split up with Zach by then, Mrs. Holt could read her like an open book. She knew Mia was still totally hung up on Zach Lawson. With all that heavy baggage, if Ethan Holt tried using a kid to lock Mia down, he was practically begging for a massive disaster. Besides, with Mia physically broken like this, Mrs. Holt was sweating over whether the bride's feelings might take a dark turn too. But the absolute biggest shocker for Mrs. Holt? The mind-blowing fact that Mia actually caved and agreed to go through with this whole wedding anyway. Knowing all eyes were on them at this wedding, Mrs. Holt forced a tight smile, trying her hardest to make her expression look at least somewhat natural. She gently placed Ethan Holt's hand over Mia Bennett's, praying he would actually treat her well. But Mia just sat there, cold, and completely unresponsive to Mrs. Holt's words. Just as Mrs. Holt's face started twisting into a furious scowl, Ethan smoothly stepped in to save the day and diffuse the unbearable tension. Taking charge, he walked right up to Mia and gently pushed her wheelchair, bringing her up to the altar to face the priest. Despite that awkward little hiccup, everyone thankfully stuck to the rehearsal script and kept the whole show moving forward. Because of Mia's fragile physical state, they had to totally gut the ceremony, skipping over a ton of the traditional wedding rituals. But there was absolutely no way they could skip the ring exchange. Right on cue, the flower girl trotted up with the wedding bands. Mia grabbed the ring, but just as she was about to slide it onto Ethan's finger, she froze, staring blankly at the diamond like she was completely lost in a daze. That was the exact same wedding ring Mia and I had picked out together for our own big day. Now, the wedding was actually happening, but the groom standing up there wasn't me. Ethan held out his hand, his fake smile practically cracking under the pressure, right before he heard her softly whisper a very familiar name. "Zach, will you marry me?" she murmured. Hearing that, Ethan's polite smile instantly vanished, completely shattered. But with hundreds of eyes glued to him, there was no way he was going to run off and publicly humiliate himself. So, he forced a painful grimace that looked worse than crying and whispered a harsh reminder. "Mia, it is time to exchange the rings." Only then did she suddenly snap back to harsh reality. She lowered her gaze and awkwardly jammed the ring, which was totally the wrong size for him, onto his ring finger. Ethan was absolutely shaken by how deeply distracted she was. Honestly, he felt like he was understanding the woman he was marrying less and less by the second. I guess it is true what they say. The things you cannot have will always drive you crazy, while the one who is spoiled with love feels invincible and fearless. Back when I was still madly in love with Mia, I never once felt even a tiny spark of genuine love coming from her in return. She just completely took my endless kindness for granted, saving her absolute sweetest and gentlest side entirely for Ethan. But now that she had exactly what she wanted, and I had finally walked away, she was standing there marrying Ethan while acting like she had just lost the love of her life. Seriously, who was she even putting on this pathetic show for? Watching her, My mind instantly flashed back to that class reunion, where we drew fortune cards just to kill the awkward tension. The card read, "If your heart tightly holds onto high expectations, they will all crumble into absolutely nothing. But if you desire absolutely nothing, you will walk away with a bountiful harvest." I used to be so desperately hopeful that Mia and I could start a beautiful new family together. Yet back then, every single time push came to shove, I was always the very first person she casually threw away. Eventually, my heart just went completely dead toward her. So when I finally married Sophie Reed, it was not out of petty revenge. I just wanted my grandpa to find some peace of mind. Honestly, I only ever planned on Sophie and me being a completely respectful, low-drama married couple in name only. I never placed any heavy expectations on her shoulders, but Sophie poured out a love so pure and overwhelming it filled my broken heart. My fortune card had actually come true, but what about Mia allegedly losing her true love? Judging by her completely unhinged behavior up there at the altar, it looked like her terrible fortune had come true, too. But let us be real, I did not believe for a second she actually loved me. What she felt for me was just a toxic, comfortable habit. She was simply addicted to having me pathetically chasing after her like a lost puppy. She was so used to me eagerly bending to her every single demand without a shred of complaint or asking for anything in return. And now that I was finally gone, she suddenly claimed I was her true love? Please, who in their right mind would ever believe that garbage? I could not even finish watching that train wreck of a wedding. Halfway through, Sophie started feeling super nauseous, so we sneaked out early. She figured the wedding banquet was just way too packed and insanely stuffy, thinking a quick walk outside in the fresh air might settle her stomach. But the second we stepped outside, her stomach completely turned upside down, and she started throwing up even worse than before. Even though she stubbornly insisted she was totally fine, I was freaking out. So I rushed her straight to the hospital. And weirdly enough, they moved us right from the ER over to the obstetrics department. That was when it finally hit us like a ton of bricks. Sophie was actually pregnant. Just to be absolutely safe, the doctors ran a full, dedicated examination on her. When she finally got the official confirmation that she was exactly 4 weeks pregnant, she looked at the results like it was all some crazy, beautiful dream. "Zach Lawson, I am actually pregnant," Sophie cried out in joy, grabbing my face with both hands and planting a massive, passionate kiss right on my lips. She smiled so brightly and beautifully that her eyes practically vanished. "Honey, you are going to be a dad." Her sudden, overwhelming kiss caught me completely off guard. My face instantly exploded into bright, burning red, and I got so flustered I awkwardly pushed her back a little bit. "Whoa, what are you doing? We are literally in the middle of the hospital," I stammered. Luckily, the obstetrics ward was packed with ecstatic couples just like us. Blending right into that joyful crowd, our little outburst barely even registered. After that incredible news, neither of us had any desire to stick around in Harbor City for another second. We immediately booked the very next flight out and bolted straight back to South City. The moment we arrived, Sophie practically flew upstairs to scream the good news to her parents. Meanwhile, I rushed back to my own house first, absolutely buzzing to tell my grandpa the amazing news. But the exact second I stepped through the front door, the house was dead silent. I called out to him happily, but there was zero response. A cold spike of dread hit me, and my heart terrifyingly skipped a beat. Panicking, I threw open his bedroom door and froze. Grandpa was collapsed completely motionless on the floor. I screamed his name over and over, but he would not wake up. My hands shaking uncontrollably, I somehow managed to pull out my phone and instantly dialed 911, desperately calling for an ambulance. Then, I grabbed my phone and dialed Sophie Reed. Grandpa passed out. "Help me." My tearful, trembling voice barely managed to choke out those 5 simple words before the entire Reed family went into sheer panic, dropping everything to sprint downstairs. The second the wailing ambulance finally arrived, we all piled in, rushing to the hospital together in an agonizingly tense ride. Pacing outside the freezing emergency room doors, my nerves completely shattered. Sophie wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight as I sobbed uncontrollably against her shoulder, her soft voice whispering constant reassurances. "Shh, Grandpa is going to pull through this. You have to stay strong," she murmured gently. "If you fall apart now, he's just going to worry himself sick the second he opens his eyes." Deep down, I knew she was completely right. Letting my spiraling panic take over wasn't going to help a single thing right now. But every time my mind flashed back to pushing that door open and finding Grandpa lying totally lifeless on the floor, fresh tears stung my eyes. Even Mr. and Mrs. Reed were eaten up with heavy guilt over the whole ordeal. Grandpa was usually all by himself at home, and the Reeds had made it a habit to check in and keep a close eye on him for a while during the day. Who in their right mind could have predicted that after just one single day of not checking up on him, a total nightmare like this would suddenly unfold? It felt like an absolute eternity of agonizing waiting before the red operating room light finally flipped green, and the exhausted doctor stepped out so we could finally get some answers. He had clearly spent years watching terrified families completely break down in these dreary hallways, so our tear-stained faces didn't even faze him in the slightest. "Thank God you got him here in time," the doctor sighed. "The resuscitation was incredibly successful, and he is going to make it. However, the old man is still incredibly frail, so he still needs to stay hospitalized for close observation for a bit." Hearing those words, the crushing weight on my chest finally began to lift. Sophie stayed glued to my side as we headed straight into the hospital room. It took 3 agonizing days, but Grandpa finally opened his tired eyes, immediately noticing the heavy guilt etched across my face. He just let out a weary sigh, reaching up with a trembling hand to gently wipe the fresh tears off my cheeks. "Your grandpa is just getting ancient. I'm practically useless now. I only took one clumsy tumble, yet I caused this huge, crazy commotion." I gripped his frail, wrinkled hand desperately, fiercely shaking my head. "No, Grandpa, you are not old. Don't you dare say that. You still have to stick around for a very, very long time. You promised you'd be here to watch the baby come into this world, and you have to stay right by their side as they grow up." The second I mentioned the word baby, a spark of life finally returned to his tired eyes. "That's right. I'm going to be a great-grandfather soon. Well then, I guess this old man has to fight hard to stick around a little bit longer. Just like you said, Zach, I need to see my great-grandkid born and watch them grow up right." Flash forward to when Sophie was 7 months pregnant, one of my old buddies back in Harbor City dropped a massive bombshell on me. Mia Bennett had completely lost her baby. It was a brutal, late-term miscarriage, and the doctors couldn't do a single thing to save the child. The crazy part? She never even liked Ethan Holt to begin with. The only reason she allowed herself to be forced into that miserable marriage was because of the pregnancy. But because of that tragedy, a sudden, delusional sliver of hope sparked in her dark heart. In her twisted logic, since the kid was gone, she hadn't permanently tied herself to another man after all. Did this actually mean she thought she could come crawling back and beg on her knees for my forgiveness? But the most urgent hurdle was that she desperately needed to divorce Ethan Holt first. And the more she panicked and pushed for it, the more spectacularly everything blew up in her face, heading in the exact direction she dreaded most. Because Ethan Holt absolutely flat out refused to divorce her. With him playing the doting husband and her having extremely limited mobility, a quick, uncontested divorce was completely out of the question. She was trapped, forced to just wait it out. 6 months felt like an absolute eternity. But as she waited and miserably waited, the universe threw a massive wrench into her plans. What she ended up waiting for was the news that Sophie Reed had just given birth to my beautiful baby girl. That same exact day, Mia completely lost whatever was left of her mind. She couldn't hold herself back anymore, scrambling to buy a ticket for the absolute earliest flight and desperately rushing all the way to South City. By the time Mia dragged herself all the way to the South City hospital, the clock had already struck 8 at night. When she finally showed up in front of me, looking utterly haggard, travel-worn, and dead on her feet, I genuinely almost failed to recognize her. It wasn't until her raspy, broken voice called out my name that I finally connected this miserable, exhausted wreck of a woman with the once glorious, high and mighty Dr. Bennett from Harbor City First Hospital back in the day. I glanced over her shoulder, fully expecting some kind of entourage, but quickly realized that no one else had come with her. Raising an eyebrow in sheer curiosity, I stared right at her. "You seriously came all the way out here alone?" Mia just gave a pathetic, silent nod. Ever since the amputation, she had practically lived in hiding, yet she dragged herself out just to see me. It was painfully obvious she had snuck out her very first solo trip since becoming completely disabled. And crossing state lines far from home in her condition, she had absolutely gone through hell and back, running into countless brutal problems along the way. She had faced endless flights of steep steps that her heavy wheelchair simply couldn't climb up, Narrow stone bollards on the sidewalk, meant strictly for foot traffic, had completely trapped her on the other side of the road during steep uphills, leaving her stranded since she still totally sucked at maneuvering that damn chair. There was the absolute, helpless humiliation of pushing one struggling step forward, only to violently slide 3 steps back. Yet, all of that crushing exhaustion seemed to magically vanish the split second she locked eyes with me. Despite the obvious, uneasy dread eating her alive from the inside, a desperate, pathetic flash of hope practically radiated from her tear-stained eyes. Staring right at me, she finally choked out the desperate, begging plea for reconciliation that she had been obsessively burying deep in her heart for so long. "Zach, I never actually had a child with Ethan Holt. Can you please forgive me?" But the very second those absurd words fell from her lips, her wheelchair was violently shoved backward by a sudden, aggressive force. The chair spun back wildly out of her control. Sophie Reed strutted right past her with an icy, displeased glare, gracefully taking the seat right next to me. "Miss Bennett, who exactly do you think you are to come here spewing that garbage?" Sophie spat, her tone razor-sharp. "Are you speaking as the backstabbing ex-girlfriend who completely ruined Zach's life? Or are you speaking as Ethan Holt's actual married wife? Or maybe just some shameless beggar trying to weaponize her disability to score cheap sympathy?" Mia was instantly choked, completely speechless by the sheer venom in her words. For a long, agonizing second, the pathetic woman didn't even know how to formulate a single answer. But Sophie Reed wasn't about to let her off the hook just because she decided to play dumb and stay completely silent. "And you're seriously trying to steal my husband right to my face? Did you magically forget that Zach is already married to me? Why on earth are you creeping around looking for Zach in the middle of the night? Are you auditioning for the role of the home-wrecking side piece?" I honestly had no idea that the once famous Dr. Bennett of Harbor City First Hospital was actually someone with such trashy morals. Wild, right? Someone who would actually go do IVF with another guy and pop out a kid right before her own wedding. I guess pulling a stunt like this isn't so shocking for you. Mia's face drained of color, then flushed a bright, angry crimson. Finally, listening to Sophie Reed's words get nastier and nastier, she just couldn't hold it back anymore. With a twisted, ugly expression, she cut her off. "This is between me and Zach. What the hell does it have to do with you?" Hearing that garbage, Sophie let out a soft sneer. She was just gearing up to fire back and tear into her, but I stepped up first. "You really are delusional. Sophie is my wife. How does you obsessively pestering her husband have nothing to do with her?" That one single sentence made the two women react in completely opposite ways. Sophie Reed was instantly soothed. She sat obediently right by my side, totally eating up the word wife I had just dropped. It definitely hadn't been easy for her to get me to call her that, even just once. Not to mention, I was openly defending her right to her rival's face. But for Mia Bennett, it was the absolute opposite. All of Sophie's savage insults didn't crush her anywhere near as much as my one simple sentence of blatant favoritism. Mia's face instantly went ghost white. Her eyes blew wide with pure disbelief, and her voice unconsciously spiked. You're taking her side?" "You would, actually." Her frantic voice was instantly cut off by the sound of a baby crying. Only then did the reality slap her in the face. She remembered exactly why she had come here. Sophie had just given birth to my daughter. It hit her like a ton of bricks just how incredibly stupid she had acted, and what kind of totally foolish garbage she had just spewed out loud. She stared blankly at me. Zach Lawson, the guy who had just been so cold and merciless toward her. But the second my baby started crying, I completely ignored her, turned sideways, and scooped up my little girl, gently rocking her right back to sleep. When I finally caught a free second, I made sure to shoot a lethal glare right at Mia, since her loud mouth was the reason my daughter got startled in the first place. Once my sweet girl fell back into a deep, peaceful sleep, I gently laid her back down in her crib. Then, I turned my head and gave Mia Bennett a dead-cold order. "You are not welcome here. Get out, Mia." Completely shattered, Mia dragged herself out of the hospital in total despair. A massive, bright, round moon hung heavy in the pitch-black night sky. Looking up, she was suddenly hit by a memory. My first meeting with Mia had actually happened on a full moon night exactly like this one. I had been clutching a dying stray kitten in my arms because every single vet clinic nearby had locked their doors. I was running around, panicking, begging anyone to tell me where I could find help to save that poor little guy. After I finally heard about one spot that was still taking emergencies, I took off sprinting like an absolute madman, completely blind to where I was going, and boom, I crashed right into her. I apologized over and over again. That's when she spotted the tiny kitten in my arms. Once she grasped what was going on, she didn't hesitate and dragged me to the animal hospital with her. But man, it was just too late. The kitten was way too little, and despite everything, the vets just couldn't save its life. Afterwards, I was completely wrecked. I carefully picked out a peaceful spot to bury the little guy, and I just sat there, crying my eyes out in silence for what felt like hours. She got a text from her college professor saying she had to rush back to campus. But she saw me still glued to that spot, quietly shedding tears. She just handed me a tissue, gave a small nod, and headed back to school. But after that day, I was absolutely hooked on her. I told her straight up that I was into her. She totally rejected my confession, but there was no way I was backing down. I pulled out every crazy trick in the book to win her over. Mia slowly got completely used to me always being around, so when I suddenly vanished into thin air, only to show up later linked arm in arm with some other girl, she had actually panicked, her heart skipping a beat. But the raw emotion burning in my eyes when I looked at her was so insanely obvious. She instantly knew I was just playing hard to get to make her jealous. Eventually, things just fell into place, and we ended up together. But then, her beloved professor's health took a massive nosedive. She felt like she owed that professor everything for guiding her career. So, the moment she found out the professor was losing sleep over his son, Ethan Holt, she stepped up. She bent over backward, taking care of the guy. In her mind, she just wanted to repay her mentor's kindness. She swore up and down that she hadn't actually caught feelings for Ethan. She never in a million years imagined that her choices would push us to a bitter breakup. She was way too cocky. She was dead certain I would stay by her side forever, but she was clueless. She forgot that forever is just a fairy tale. You can't just keep bleeding someone dry without giving a single ounce of love in return and expect them to stick around. She messed up big time, but the wake-up call came way too late to fix anything. Mia slowly pushed her wheelchair right out the hospital doors. Looking at her from behind, she just looked so fragile, broken, and agonizingly lonely. And standing right there waiting for her was Ethan Holt, looking pale as a ghost but standing his ground. The second he saw her roll out, he flashed her this weak little smile. "Mia, I came to take you home. Mia Bennett, I've already dragged myself through hell for you. I'm never letting go. Even if it kills me, I'll stay tangled up in your life until my very last breath." Meanwhile, back inside the warm hospital room, Sophie Reed was staring completely mesmerized at our baby daughter's sweet, sleeping face. Her heart was absolutely overflowing with joy. I gave her shoulder a playful little poke, snapping her out of it as she looked up at me with this cute, confused expression. I softened my voice, asking, "Have we finally picked out our daughter's name yet?" "Well, not her official one," she replied. "My folks and I want Grandpa to have the honor of picking that. But how about we choose her nickname ourselves?" I thought about it for a second, then nodded. When I asked what her nickname should be, Sophie Reed just sighed and shook her head. My parents absolutely hated the names I chose. They told me to just leave it up to you. Hearing her say that, a spark of genuine curiosity hit me. Just what kind of weird names had she come up with? But her next words made me instantly side with Mr. and Mrs. Reed. Piggy, Sparkle, Sunny. I completely ignored the hopeful look in her eyes, begging for my approval. Every single option was either a pet animal or something shiny. If we actually called her those, our poor kid would be embarrassed for years. "Let's just go with Nana," I declared, making the final call. Honestly, I wasn't exactly a genius at naming things either, but Nana couldn't go wrong. By the next day, Nana was officially locked in as her nickname. Thankfully, Grandpa's health had been steadily bouncing back during this peaceful period. When he found out he was given the absolute honor of naming his great-granddaughter, the old man was overjoyed. He stayed up all night poring through books and finally delivered the name, Charlotte Lawson. A beautiful, flawless jade, crafted by nature itself. A pure heart holding fierce ambition, and a spirit burning bright. I absolutely loved this name, and thankfully, nobody brought up the heavy drama from last night. After everything we had survived, there was no reason to stay trapped in the past. We had to keep looking forward.